Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Very warm welcome. Yes, it is my pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all honourable ministers, ambassadors, esteemed guests, colleagues, and friends joining us here at IIEP in Paris and online. This is day 2 of IIEP's 60th anniversary symposium, and today is made up of 2 parts. Firstly, we will celebrate and reflect on 6 decades of IIEP. Then we will continue our discussions on the future of planning with 4 panel sessions. Before we start, I'll just explain a few things about how today will work, and sorry if you heard all of this yesterday. Simultaneous interpretation is available in French, English, and Spanish using the headsets on the table by the door. French interpretation is on channel 5, English on 6, and Spanish on 7. All of the resources you see here today are available online, including the final agenda and the slides you see on screen in all 3 languages. For those here in Paris, please scan the QR code on the back of your badge. And for those of you joining online, this is available via the chat. And just a word to our online audience, we are very thrilled to have you with us today. There are dedicated members here again in Paris to keep you updated via the chat, and there will be activities to take part in, so keep an eye out for these. If you do have questions for the panelists, please ask them directly in the chat, and a selection of these will be passed on to our moderators in the room. So this morning, we go forward with our 60th anniversary celebration. So without further ado, I will hand you over to the director of IIEP, Martín Benavides.
Good morning, bonjour, buenos días. Thank you for coming again to our symposium today, and welcome to the new guests that are coming for this second day of the symposium. We had a very good discussions yesterday, and I hope that we will continue with the same level of discussions, presentations, and I would say atmosphere of celebration and in this second day. Now I'm here because I have the responsibility of reading a message from our General Director, Mrs. Audrey Azoulay, who is right now leading the General Conference, but she sent to us a very nice message that I will read right now. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, while I cannot be with you in person this morning, I am delighted to wish the UNESCO International Institute for Educational Planning a very happy 60th anniversary. Quality education is an intrinsic right for everyone, everywhere. Yet, ensuring this right requires designing and planning strong education systems capable of withstanding the immense challenges of our time. For 6 decades, IIEP has been an unwavering partner to UNESCO member states, accompanying them as they develop national capacities to effectively plan and manage education systems through his offices in Paris, Dakar, and Buenos Aires. IIEP's added value lies in its unique combination of research, training, and technical assistance, 3 intersecting lines of action that have allowed the Institute to remain at the forefront of this field throughout the years. As we celebrate IIEP's 60th anniversary, I would like to send a message to the large community of decision makers, educational planners, and administrators who have worked with or been trained by the Institute. Each of you is an advocate working towards the attainment of Sustainable Development Goal 4, ensuring inclusive and equitable quality education and promoting lifelong learning opportunities to all. Today, through through its International Symposium on the Future of Educational Planning, IIEP is once again demonstrating its determination to review, reflect, and chart a path forward for educational planning in a fast-changing world, considering new trends and perspectives. As we collectively mark this milestone, I congratulate IIEP for its important contributions to global education. Planning is the cornerstone upon which we are building and continue to build the foundations for educational systems that help shape more just, sustainable, and peaceful societies. Happy anniversary to all.
Thank you, and we thank Ms. Azoulay for these kind words on education and the role of IIEP. And more on that subject, I would like to introduce a short film which highlights the vital work done by the Institute over its 60-year history.
We place them at the center. Children with their dreams.
I will get to be a pilot and I will pass with flying colors.
Teenagers with their ambitions. Teachers with their needs.
Good morning.
Good morning,
It doesn't matter where they are. They all understand that education is everything. They know that without education, there is no social or economic improvement, and there is no tomorrow. Ensuring that there will be a tomorrow is our goal. The key is not just education, it's planning for education. It's about responding and being flexible in the now, while also thinking long-term. It's about taking steps, big and small, that lead to more steps, which in turn lead to other steps. This is the only way to achieve sustainable changes and the Sustainable Development Goals. But to do so, we have to engage decision makers, planners, and partners across all levels of an education system.
ចឹងនៅពេលនោះគឺយើងចាប់ផ្ដើមរៀបចំជាហៅថាផែនការយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រវិស័យអប់រំរយៈពេល5ឆ្នាំយុទ្ធសាស្ត្រពាក់ព័ន្ធរៀបចំហើយបន្តមកទៀតគឺយើងមានឯកទេសមកពី IIEP គឺជួយផ្ដល់យោបល់បាទហើយក៏ដូចជាជួយនៅក្នុងការធ្វើការពិគ្រោះយោបល់ផ្សេងៗនិងជួយនៅក្នុងការធ្វើការវិនិច្ឆ័យតម្លៃពាក់កណ្ដាលឆ្នាំបាទតែការអនុវត្តនឹងវាយ៉ាងម៉េចដែរនិងការវិនិច្ឆ័យតម្លៃចុងឆ្នាំផងដែរបាទ
Since 1963, we at UNESCO's International Institute for Educational Planning have dedicated ourselves to turning visions and goals into concrete plans, policies, and action. How? By training 24,000 individuals from 183 countries and providing technical cooperation support throughout the entire planning cycle, from analysis to implementation and monitoring. And also by producing 2,000 publications in multiple languages, encompassing various dimensions from teacher management to ethics, from gender equality to digital education policies in the post-COVID-19 era. Data and proof are the backbone of our work, alongside political dialogue and visionary leadership within countries. We combine diverse approaches, be it gender-responsive planning, integrity planning, or crisis-sensitive planning, so that the whole education system can be transformed. We want to continue to place all of them at the center, every day, every time the bell rings at their school. They are the generation that will one day lead the world. If we want to have a tomorrow, we need to plan for it now, in the present. Learn from the past, work in the present, and build a better future.
I think that short film really encapsulates the essential work of IIEP and its achievements over the years. And to discuss this further, we have a section on IIEP-UNESCO Voices. We will explore the milestones of the institution and its impact over time. I'm delighted to welcome someone who we are very familiar with here at IIEP, Sara RUTO, as moderator. Sara's career in education and research spans 30 years and includes experience in large multi-country programs with impact in international policies around reading and numeracy. She is now Programme Officer at Echidna Giving and is, of course, a member of the IIEP Governing Board. And following the session, we will go directly to another short video and then straight on to your keynote speech. Welcome, Sara.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Hamjambo. Bonjour. I need to improve on that. It is really a warm pleasure to be with you here today. And I will just go directly to the point. We have 5 very interesting people this morning who are going to be sharing with us some stories. So I'd like to welcome them here to the podium. Please, okay. Yeah, if we can arrange this. In a nice circle, we don't want anybody left out. You can move the seat a little bit. Yeah, okay. So the gentlemen and ladies here all have something very interesting to say. And you will forgive me. I'm going to even put on my timer because I've been told that you need 5 minutes, to only give you 5 minutes each to tell the story of your countries and the story of your life. And because I sit in the board, where we always insist that they must also deliver, you see, I don't want later on in a board meeting, I'm asked, how come you did not manage time when we asked you a small activity? So please welcome. And I suspect that all of you can go to LinkedIn and understand their stories. So what I'm going to do is to tell you something that probably they have not shared in LinkedIn as they come in. And I'd like to see if you can guess who this person is. Now, the person I'm going to welcome here to talk is a poet, a storyteller, and a TV man. Oh, I've already given a clue. So it is one of the men. And also loves math research. Who do you think it is amongst the 3 men seated here? Quickly, people. Yes? No. Now, what kind of class is this? It's a very simple task. Okay, can anybody guess? Valentin? All right. I'd like to please welcome His Excellency, Justin Davis Valentin, Ministry of Education in the Seychelles, to share with us. And your 5 minutes will begin once you're here.
So good morning again, ladies, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. I've been speaking a lot at IIEP conference since yesterday, but I'm really delighted to be with you all. But today it's not fairy tales which I'm going to talk about. Yes, I like story, but not for fairy tale this morning. I'm going to talk about our experience with IIEP, the Seychelles experiences with IIEP. So I'll begin straight away with the history that we have with IIEP. So the Seychelles Ministry of Education have had a long history with IIEP, and this dates back as far as the late 80s when the ministry began to embrace policy planning and development as a major strand in education. So to a larger extent, the Ministry of Education then was influenced by the work being done at IIEP, and a section policy planning was introduced. The focus was more on physical and infrastructural development. there was a boom in the construction of new schools and an overall restructuring of the schooling system. So to further gain benefit of the work of IIEP, in 1999, the ministry introduced the Education Policy Development, Education Policy Planning Division with three main sections: research, curriculum, planning, and evaluation, research, planning, and policy development, and then examination. So the division operated like a sort of replica of IIEP, and several of its mission objectives were consistent to those of the Institute. That was the era when the Ministry of Education began its renewed and enhanced relationship with IIEP. Several officers of the ministry were sent to attend training workshops in Paris or in other cities where IIEP workshops were being hosted. The post-education planners was introduced, and through advanced training program with IIEP, several senior officers were properly acquainted to the arts of education policy planning. To date, more than 10 ministry officials have followed the ATP courses, and several others have participated in either face-to-face or online courses, including myself. Subsequently, new jobs opportunities, namely policy analysts, education economists, financial analysts, researchers, and curriculum planners emerged within the Ministry of Education. Another significant impact of the work of IIEP on education development in the Seychelles was through the SACMEC studies, in particular SACMEC 1 and SACMEC 2 studies held in 1995 and 2000 respectively. Though as a ministry we did not conduct the SACMEC 1 study, several officers of the ministry were heavily involved in the various workshops and meetings that were held around the study. We were then heavily involved in the SACMEC 2 study, not only because I was personally engaged with the study as one of the national coordinator, research coordinator, but also because of the model of research. Test construction, administration, and analysis that IIEP team was using and instilling in researchers of the participating country. So my personal engagement with SACMEC team allowed me to properly lead research in the Seychelles, enhance my measurement and testing skills, and acquaint advanced test theory techniques such as item response theory, in particular the Rush model. So the SACMEC coordinating team has established a high level, high standard in education. And I pay tribute to the work of late Ken Ross, for instance, for his leadership in leading the SACMEC study. Now I have to scroll down. So the most recent impact of IIEP in the Seychelles was the development of the medium-term strategic plan. And the development of the plan was led by IIEP. Subsequently, the development of the following plan, the MTS 2018-2022, was also achieved through the same approach. Now, let me look perhaps for the best part of my speech before I end. So planning remained the core educational development of IIEP, and IIEP will be relevant for the years to come. Specific to the Seychelles context, the core functions of IIEP are consistent to the mission of the Ministry of Education. The contemporary themes, namely governance and accountability, gender equity, digital and technological education, climate change, technical and vocational education, are all issues that we are addressing as a ministry. We will continue to request for expertise and technical support of IIEP to achieve our vision. So I wish that the House this morning acclaim the work of IIEP. Thank you.
Thank you, and my apologies for showing my white card, but I think you give me the permission. It is now my pleasure to welcome our second speaker, and this speaker is a dancer. Amongst here, dancers. Yes, who? Sorry? We need to engage, interact. That's the education of tomorrow. Who is a dancer here? Nobody? Ministers, none of you look like dancers. And so, Martin, I think we will have to prove later on in the cocktail that actually we have a dancer in the house. It is my pleasure to welcome the former Minister for Employment, Technical Education and Vocational Education, Madagascar. She is a dancer. And this is Her Excellency Maria Toto. I am not going to pronounce your last name.
Thank you, Chair. Mesdames et messieurs, bonjour.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings with all protocol observed. I'm honored. And I also have a lot of gratitude because I'm here, and I really would like to thank you for having invited me. In 27-28, when I was training here in Paris as part of the ATP, in Paris, I would have never guessed that I would come back here in 2023 and have a platform to share my experience as a former trainee of IIEP. I would therefore like to express my deep gratitude to all of you, the members of the IIEP Paris family. Allow me to reiterate my respect and my thanks. IIEP is an institution that every manager or decision maker responsible for the management and planning of education in their country should attend at some point in their career. Thanks to my master's degree obtained in 2008, I was able to climb several ranks and occupy senior positions twice in the Malagasy public administration, both as Secretary of State in charge of technical education and vocational training from 2009 to 2011, and then as Minister of Employment, Technical Education and Vocational Training from 2006 to 2018. I owe my professional success in large part to the IIEP. Like me, 21 Malagasy education managers have followed the the ATP training program, and around 350 professionals have benefited from one or more online and or face-to-face training courses to hone their capacities at the IIEP. The majority of the alumni are the civil servants of the planning division, including the current Secretary General of the Ministry of National Education and several successive directors responsible for education planning. Other former interns also hold positions of responsibility within international organizations or private companies. Just to give an example, Mrs. Rako Tondraska Remondine, project coordinator at UNESCO Madagascar. By training men and women to become experts who understand the specific challenges and issues to be met in each situation in the education system, the IIEP has an impact on the country's development. With the different methods used during our training course and the existence of available studies and research documents carried out by the IIEP, we, the former trainees, can reflect and propose better measures to manage the financial and human resources allocated to the education system. I would like to talk about the teacher management study because most of the teachers are the FRAM teachers hired and paid by parent associations, given the lack of human resources in the Malagasy education system. And it's thanks to IIEP that
more than 15 works have been published for Madagascar. Ladies and gentlemen, we know that every country's ambition is to invest massively in its human capital in order to guarantee opportunities for one and all, especially the youth. The education system hence must provide the human capital that the country needs to progress. In my case, I could work in designing, planning, and implementing Madagascar's technical and vocational education and skills development systems with the support and contribution of various stakeholders, including UNESCO. For example, when we drew up our national policy on vocational training and employment, we were able to plan and diversify the training offer in order to better adapt to the needs of the local and regional businesses. This policy is based on the recognition of 5 sectors of activity with great potential for growth and job creation, namely rural development, tourism, accommodation, catering, textiles, clothing, accessories, ICT, and civil works and strategic resources. Planning, in fact, priority investment planning for the development of these sectors has been reinforced thanks to the creation of a Malagasy Vocational Training Fund. Each company must contribute to 1% of its wage bill so that they can contribute to the training of their employees. And this has become a legislation, and it has been applied ever since 2018. Now, with regards to other colleagues who had the training program, they are very competent planners, and they work at both central and decentralized levels. Currently, IIEP is providing support to the law on the orientation of the education system in Madagascar. I've just got 1 more minute, but before I conclude my speech, I cannot hide my delight at the establishment of the IIEP Dakar, because the impact of IIEP Dakar's research and development work responds to the African challenges and realities. I'm delighted that my commitment as a former vice president to institutionalize the gender dimension at all stages is gradually coming to fruition as a former FAWE vice president as well. Now, this project is really interesting, and I'm really glad that this is gradually taking shape thanks to other projects such as Women in Leadership Learning and Gender at the Center. Now, to conclude my speech, my wish for the IIEP is that you should continue helping strengthen the institutional capacities of member countries, especially African trainees. I'm convinced that IIEP's mandate and mission are more than ever relevant today as they correspond and adapt to new needs that are required. So I would really like to wish IIEP a very long life for the 60 years to come. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
As chairperson of FAWE Madagascar, you deserved the 3 additional minutes. You can see there are very many good things IIEP has done, and that is why your mission, your ikigai, is cut for IIEP, so to speak. Our next speaker started as a primary school principal. Now, who here looks like a primary school principal? There's a principal amongst you? Okay, it is my pleasure because he has to leave very shortly, so I will not, I will spare us all to welcome His Excellency Geoffrey Henley, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Education, St. Kitts and Nevis. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I recognize Madam Assistant Director General, honorable ministers, distinguished ambassadors, IIEP Director, Mr. Martin Benaviz, ladies and gentlemen, and of course, I see in the audience one of my former colleagues, Dr. Neva, and I recognize her for being here, quite a surprise this morning. The Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis is honored to be invited to address this IIEP 60th Anniversary Symposium. As Deputy Prime Minister with responsibility for education, I recognize the critical role of the IIEP in training of policymakers, education administrators, and technical officers within the ministry and associated agencies. Policy officers from St. Kitts and Nevis who have accessed IIEP courses from our education ministry, both in person and remotely, report on the tangible impacts the learning modules have afforded in terms of improved quality in their planning and strategic orientation. Further, the IIEP courses have strengthened the confidence of our professionals in their roles. As St. Kitts and Nevis embarks on an ambitious economic, social, and financial strategy in support of the government Sustainable Island State agenda, one central factor transcending our goals is the importance of quality education at all levels of society, transforming our small island state economy into a sustainable and industrially attractive environment means having a dedicated, qualified, skilled, and knowledgeable workforce. So education planning continues to be a priority. UNESCO collaborated with the government of St. Kitts and Nevis to modernize and scale up our education policy framework with leading-edge policy expertise. This covers policy input in professionalizing our teaching force, strengthening the national qualification accreditation system, and introducing education for sustainable development into our curriculum. But underpinning these developments is the importance of building and retaining the skill sets of our team of education planners, providing them with a rigorous approach to their task, from education sector diagnostic to the preparation and monitoring and planning implementation. Two areas of particular focus for St. Kitts and Nevis education planners in the coming months are mainstreaming early childhood care and education, ECCE, and setting standards for secondary teacher management. We are pursuing adopting internationally recognized ECCE standards in developing appropriate pedagogy and practice for early childhood education. But I must stress that planning for such policies need to be adapted and distinctly tailored to the context of a small island developing state such as ours. This will mean education planning and policy development to develop tailored, comprehensive descriptions of knowledge, skills, and dispositions that ECCE teachers need to support the holistic development of children, and providing systematic and consistent structure and content to support the professional development of early childhood teaching and the child care workforce. As regards secondary teacher management standards, we continue to work with UNESCO in rolling out a comprehensive reform in professionalization of our teaching force. This will involve education planners working on the UNESCO guidance on the development of a national teacher qualification framework to guide teacher recruitment, the design and development of a national teacher education curriculum framework for pre-service teacher education and not in-service professional development programs, accompanied by guidelines, frameworks, and standards for the accreditation of teaching education programs, continuous professional development. The IIEP can be justifiably proud of its legacy in supporting us as a small island developing state in our pursuit to tool up our education planner and administrators. Without this high-level technical IIEP training, our ambition to make quality education central to our sustainable island state agenda would not be optimal in realizing our goals. Congratulations on achieving 60 years of providing this quality of training. Thank you, IIEP.
Thank you, Prime Minister. In fact, he was quite on time. I only added 40 seconds, which is good. Now, our next speaker was a 3,000-meter steeplechase runner. Now, where I come from in Kenya, if you do the steeplechase, you are gold material. Who is it? Who is it amongst them? Ladies and gentlemen, somebody said Eric. It is now my pleasure to introduce Eric Scheller, State Secretary, Ministry of Education and Research, Sweden, to come and share.
Thank you, Sarah. And as I said to you before, I think the key to success for all non-Kenyan runners is to at all time avoid to compete with Kenyan runners. Madam Chair, honorable ministers, excellencies, and colleagues, it's a great honor for me to be here and take part in this anniversary celebration of the IIEP. Anniversaries are for celebrations, but also for reflections. It gives us an opportunity to take stock on how far we have come and share our hopes and dreams for the future. In an ever-changing world, where the democratic space is shrinking and human rights and fundamental freedoms are on decline, the role of IIEP is perhaps, in my view, more important than ever. Education is a human right and a cornerstone of democracy, gender equality, equity, and in strengthening the capacity to attain sustainable development. Knowledge and education of good quality is essential for broad and inclusive societal engagement, critical thinking, and political involvement. The IIEP has been at the forefront of advocating for education system built on all these values. This part explains why IIEP has been a long-standing partner for Sweden. But operating on the basis of shared values is, as we all know, not enough for strong partnerships. Results must be shown. This is the other part of why IIEP has been a long-standing important partner for us. The organization has proven to equip ministries of education around the world with the skills and tools necessary to strengthen the right to education and attain the development goals. I will return to these achievements shortly. 60 years is an impressive age. It is safe to say a lot has happened when looking back at the development for the past 6 decades. For example, today we find more children than ever in schools. Girls participate in education to a degree never seen before in the history of the world, but challenges still persist. This became obvious, not least during the pandemic and the global school closures. Providing good quality education remains a challenge for many countries. Irrelevant curricula, untrained or unmotivated teachers, the use of teaching language for which the pupils don't understand, poor and unsafe facilities, and the lack of textbooks are still a reality for many students around the world. Colleagues, when it comes to global education, Sweden has a long history of strengthening national education system, including transparency, increased accountability, and good quality teacher training that leads to sustainable development. In fact, the transfer of knowledge and skills has been at the core of Swedish development cooperation, starting already in the 1950s. In the 1970s, an involved analysis appeared. It said that the development depends on the efficiency of the public administration in the recipient countries, and priority was given to basic education, children and adults, and the key to success in the long term was seen to be strengthen national systems and to improve the national capacity of educational planning. In the areas of strengths and expertise, and which is able leadership and committed staff, the IIEP contributes to UNESCO's education program at the highest level. IIEP is indeed a true center of excellence. And Sweden is proud to be one of the major core funder of the organization. But this is something we do together, and I would like hence to take this opportunity to thank the other donors to the IIEP. Together we contribute to make IIEP's knowledge openly available to all stakeholders on dedicated websites and other digital platforms. Together we support IIEPs to develop new methodologies and innovate new tools in order to improve current knowledge and techniques and planning. Together we back IIEP to constantly offer flagship training programs and constantly update them to better cope with the emerging needs and meet new demands. And together we aid education stakeholders to deal with complex challenges and answer the needs for capacity development. Ministers and colleagues, starting in 1969, Sweden has supported and collaborated with IIEP in different forms. Over these years, we have witnessed firsthand the value of IIEP's technical support to ministries of education around the world. As State Secretary, myself, I can see the contribution of the institute's knowledge for countries, but also at regional and global level. Colleagues, I would also like to highlight IIEP's important work in supporting partner countries within the framework of the Global Partnership for Education. IIEP's contributions to GPE's work to strengthen national education system could not be understated. Friends, much has been said, much and written about the concept of capacity, especially by this institute. But let me be clear, IIEP has really shown the true capacity during its history to adapt to new challenges in order to stay relevant. This will be crucial when looking into the future and the need for us all to join to tackle the challenges with the global education crisis and really transform education systems. My wish for the future of this institute is therefore very simple. I want the IIEP to continue and strengthen its excellent work. Even if we can never be sure of what the future holds, I am reassured that the IIEP will have a key role in supporting and strengthening national education systems and policies for many, many decades to come. Thank you.
That was right on the mark. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. And now, as we come to a close of this session, in which we have had our ministers speaking with us, it is my pleasure to welcome the singer in the house. And Nicola Warina Johnson, Chief Planning Officer, Ministry of Education, Guyana. She is also a PhD candidate, therefore a student of life. Welcome.
Good morning. Please allow me to conform to the established protocol. I feel humbled sharing my experience with IIEP over the years here this morning. For me, what does IIEP means to me as an education planning practitioner? I see IIEP as the institution that can shape the pathway for education planners worldwide. It provides a crossroad to our educational journey that supports and guides our path towards a more inclusive educational future as a technical professional working in different capacities, whether statistics, monitoring, and planning within the Ministry of Education. At every major step of my professional development, I looked to IIEP for the guidance and support in these areas. I remember vividly participating in the program here and thinking about the many plans we've developed in Guyana, and the one that we had before participating here, we had only achieved 35% implementation of that plan. So it meant that most of our plans developed after development just sat on a shelf. Basically, it was very hard to get managers to really implement what we've developed. And because of the skills, the course honed my education and planning and management skills, and I felt one of my key takeaways from participating is how I can get managers to implement the plan. So what did we do? When we developed our 2021-2025 education sector plan, every step of the way, from education sector analysis to the identification of strategies and programs, we involved all the persons who would have some strategic responsibility in that process from the beginning, because I felt that's one of my key takeaways from participating in this program, that's the only way we will ensure implementation. And so every step of the way, we had them being part of the process to develop that sense and level of ownership for the document. When I completed the program here, I went straight into developing and coordinating my very first education sector plan. And, I felt happy when development partners told us that it's the first plan in a long time. They took a bold and frank look at itself, at the system. Compared to other plans, as I'd mentioned, we really delved into all the areas of the education sector analysis because we had the tools from the training. We used evidence-based approaches and tools to develop our strategies and identify our programs and so on. And so the IIEP, with its global expertise and decade of experience, symbolizes the universal aspiration of quality education. So its focus on research, training, and capacity building in education planning management resonate deeply with our national goals. And based on my experience, it started the subsequent engagement that we've had over the last 5 years with IIEP. IIEP impact in Guyana has been tremendous and continue to be. At the onset of COVID, we engaged IIEP. I remember GP giving us the grant of $70,000 US, and we're like, what are we going to do? Because like many countries, we didn't know how to deal with this novel experience, especially as it relates to the risk. And so we decided that we will develop a risk management policy. And who do we turn to? IIEP to support that. And they did. Built our capacity. We approach it in such a way that it built our senior level managers' capacity to develop policy. And so we now have a risk management policy that enable us to prepare, to prevent, prepare for, and respond to emergencies. And we now have in our system risk-related indicators for the very first time. So I know that I have 1 minute. So I would like to thank IIEP for its support that it's been giving us and its continued support. But before I conclude, and to give my vision for the future of IIEP, I want to urge all stakeholders, from policymakers to educators to community, to embrace the support and purpose of the IIEP. Let us collaborate, innovate, and elevate our education to unparalleled heights. And as such, my wish to IIEP is to continue evolving to meet the needs of education sector worldwide by remaining adaptive and flexible. I thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it would be wrong for me to add even one more. You have heard from the ministers what their experience has been and what their wish is for the future. I thank you and for putting up with my time. It is actually the first time I've used the timer and it looks like it works. So thank you very much, ministers, for your contribution. Back to the moderator. Right. Okay. So maybe you can go back to the
IIEP was founded in 1963. This marked the start of an incredible journey and the establishment of a global community dedicated to building a strong foundation for education to flourish. Planning forces governments to think of the present in terms of the future. Educational planning is and remains a springboard for future decisions and actions. Planning is a continuous process, concerned not only with where to go, but how to get there and by what best route. When IIEP was founded, one of its essential missions was to help newly independent member states of UNESCO achieve universal primary education. IIEP's work recognizes that equity in education goes beyond equal distribution of opportunities and resources. It means actively addressing systemic inequalities and discrimination to give all learners an equal chance. Over the past 6 decades, IIEP has inspired and united its community with its unwavering commitment to the right of education for all. Let us celebrate, but thereafter, let us be very keenly aware of the challenges ahead of us, which we can be part of solving. IIEP has become a trusted partner to nations, particularly in Africa, empowering governments and their partners to seize opportunities to unlock the transformational power of education. Countries rely on IIEP for expertise, training, foresight, and evidence on planning and management. IIEP's thematic priorities on inequalities, on governance and accountability, on learning outcomes, and on crisis-sensitive educational planning are essential to help us move forward. To give all children the chance to discover their own talents and turn that discovery into reality. This is what educational planning is about. This is what IIEP's program is about. The Institute can be proud of the way that it has led and adapted in evolving circumstances to fulfill and extend the vision that Coombs had in mind. 60 years on, we must strike a balance between immediate actions and long-term goals, while also embracing creativity and innovation.
Thank you. And we welcome back Sara for her keynote speech. Planning the future starts now.
You have to bear with my presence. I'm back again. So distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, when we spoke with the organizers, with Muriel, she asked me today to come and talk about planning the future starts now. And then I thought, this must be a trick topic, because I am seated here amongst planning experts, students of planning, who have 60 years of experience, a reservoir of wealth. Now, what can I say about planning? That's why I said, Muriel, what really do you want me to say about planning? And then here we have IEP. It has a very good grasp of its mission. Its mission is to strengthen the capacities of member states to plan and manage their education systems. I have certain board meetings, and I can attest to the fact that even the Secretariat here is very keenly aware of their mission and how to be empathetic, sympathetic, present it in a way that makes sense to the member states. Therefore, what can I tell them more about the topic of planning? Today, you have listened to the submissions of the ministers of education who are leading their ministries and therefore their governments. And they have a very clear understanding of what planning is and perhaps how that future will look like. Yesterday and today, we all have seen that deep understanding. In fact, I remember yesterday that I started just noting down the words that were coming up about how planning needs to move. And in the D category, I didn't even start with A. In the D category, words like decentralization, deconcentration, distribution, was used to articulate the pathways that planning needs to take. And I had a lot of consensus on the architecture of planning. There was not too much tension. I therefore posit that it is safe for this moment to depart from the technicalities of planning. This group over here are professors of planning, so to speak. But maybe we need to focus on if the planning is leading to the results that we hoped for. Is it leading to why we plan education systems? So I would like, as the first video, as we came here, bring the child, the student, the learner to the center of our reflections this morning, as we focus on their future and what perhaps we need to do now. We are bound, as was stated yesterday and even today, by universal values that transcend nation and creed, race and religion. I think we all subscribe to the belief that everyone has a right to education. Article 26 of the UN Declaration of Human Rights has been domesticated, I think, by all nation states. And in the 60 years of IEP's existence, a lot of progress has been registered. IEP, I think, based on the testimonies you listened to, can claim to have contributed to system strengthening through seamless planning. IEP has been adaptive, it has offered practical tools, and you have heard the testimonies, and it has assured the promise of education to many, many more children, but sadly, not all children. And therein, I think we need to focus because we are talking about a universal value. And so until all the children, in my understanding, in this world have this right to this education, then we cannot rest easy. And that is why, while IEP has done a lot, perhaps there is a little more we can do. And that is the future we need to be thinking about as we are planning that future. So what is the profile of this child who continues to be at risk of missing out of this education? Yesterday, the minister from South Sudan reminded us that these children are often faced with a constellation of crises. They could be facing drought or floods. Whichever the case, then there is famine, there is no food. They could be facing conflict, terrorism. They're not safe. And when you're not safe, you cannot even talk about education. And in response, IEP has focused its attention to Africa, my continent. It looks like we are still the bearer of many of these things, to the countries that are in most need, to conflict and fragile homes. States. So that is where IEP has tried to be responsive, to try and bring this child to the fore of their promise to education. But even within the same country, the richer and more urban families have options. They have education fixes. Even with these fragile states, those who have are able to come up with their own solutions. In low-income countries, we have seen that secondary education is rapidly expanding. And yet in the same country, there are some children who are not even able to start school or complete school. But at the same time, you can see secondary education is expanding. Therefore, within those contexts, those who have their educational fixes are able to navigate and get their promise. But others in the same country, perhaps even just a kilometer away within the same country, are not able to do that. And we know that girls from the poorest homes still have the lowest education attainment. The reality, therefore, is that without access to education, these children of today will become the illiterates of tomorrow. They will become the adult illiterates of tomorrow. In my country, where M-Pesa is the way in which we transact financially, they will be the people, because they do not have the basic skill of reading, they will be the people who will be scammed left, right, and center, because what they have is trust, and they're not able to tell many things. So just because they do not know how to read, they will continue to face so many other disadvantages. Illiteracy, to me, equals disadvantage. And those who have literacy have a higher chance of getting white-collar jobs. They have a higher chance of getting opportunities. So lack of equity of opportunity to formal education therefore becomes a social justice issue. And that is why, to come to the topic I was given today, we need to act now. Like yesterday did not happen, but because of these people who continue to be out, we need to act now. Can we therefore do differently to accelerate progress for all children? How can we, for example, assure foundational learning as a bare minimum? And I think each system knows what their foundation will be. In the space where I come from, for me, I see a social justice is just to ensure foundational learning for everybody. I feel that is what will equal the playing ground. And after that, everybody can move on wherever they want to go. But if we do not equal this playing field by just giving that skill, then we will continue to disadvantage others. So I'm using it as my example of how I see my reality. So how can we accelerate this foundational learning, however you define this foundational learning for everyone? Because when you have a strong foundation, then this building can go to the second floor, if that is what you wish it, or can go to be a skyscraper, if that is what you wish it. The foundation is what will make things stand. I think it is important that we have this foundation. Otherwise, we will continue to proceed in the divergent paths of the haves and the have-nots. The haves will be talking about AI. They'll be talking about the promise of technology. They'll be talking about going to the moon, so many other things, while the have-nots will perhaps be dulled by the pangs of hunger to even bother to talk about anything. And we have to think about what is the future we bequeath these generations, because a future in which we are divided because of socioeconomic status, I think is a very boring future. I'd like, and that is why I was talking about singing, dancing, poetry. Those are universal. Whether you're poor or you're rich, you can be able to do that. And I think that is the future we want to see, that people, irrespective, you can actually talk about the verse of life, because we are humanity. In this new future, it is clear to me that education cannot do it alone. To accelerate the promise of education to all, we cannot just rely on the technical approach. We need a movement. We need a caucus, coalition building. We need something that will pivot the promise to everybody. We need, I think when I was reading about Japan, There was the leadership at the moment, and if there's anybody from Japan here, if I'm mutilating your history, you can tell me over a cup of tea. But for now, the story I've had made me excited. I'm told that there was a point where a leader said that in every village, every child should be reading. And I'd like to see such a movement. In India, Rukmini leading it together with the Prime Minister, that in every state, we have every child leading, and you start finding out which state is going to be the first. In Africa, which country is going to be the first to ensure that every child is reading? Can this perhaps, as in Japan, they say, be our ikigai, our mission to ensure that this is our lens of ensuring social justice for all? The conceptual framework in World Bank's 2018 development report, Igniting the Promise of Learning, suggests that a system comprises of 3 pillars: politics, policies, people. I call it the 3 Ps. And that when these are in sync, then it allows great movements to happen. And I think there are many examples that show that in whatever we are doing, we need to have these 3 Ps together: politics, policies, and people. And when I remember, for example, in Kenya, before I moved on, I used to be a teacher of history of education. And in 1978 in Kenya, the then president decided to declare 1978 as the year for adult literacy. To date, it remains the golden year because the president gave the focus. President has the power, ensured that there are budgets, led the process, and everywhere, everybody was ensuring that adults are being reached to ensure that they are able to read, be it in church, be it in school, be it in politics. So it allowed a movement, and you could see the statistics were such that there were many adults who were able to read. You can see that the promise of education left the Ministry of Education. It became a promise that was held by everyone. It became a movement, and that is why one was able to make progress. In Sobral, which is a city in East Brazil, we read that literacy levels were very low. It was a poor city. And then the mayor in town decided, no, this is not going to happen in my town. So what did they do? He ensured that tax was collected, but that it was used to improve educational provision. There was collective action. Today, Sobral is an example of what leadership outside the classroom can do to improve what is happening in the classroom. The city came up top in Brazil's 5,000 districts, and it is the best place to get state education in Brazil. It took them 23 years. But there was a connection of politics, policies, people. And so if we are to use this very simple conceptualization of planning our future, looking at the 3 Ps, in terms of politics, I think this is IIEP's comfort zone. You know how to do it, you're doing it well, you can come up with matrices, and most of the time you can be able to do what is needs to be done. And so one must continue to do it because as we listened, it is working. What about the people? I suspect that the majority of the people who have participated in the IIEP trainings are from government. I suspect, is that the case? They are from government. 70%, maybe 80% of the speakers in this 2-day symposium are either from ministries or from the UN bilaterals. And maybe this defines the key audience held dear by IIEP. But then it is also good to ask, could it be then that we are becoming an insider convening, a convening of friends preaching to the converted? If that is the case, then we need to move out a little bit because a movement cannot start and end within this room. It has to continue. Yesterday, I had about people who are left out. Even in government, Do we need to reach, or do we already reach perhaps ministries of finance, the same technical people who are the movers and shakers in the Ministry of Education? What about the other ministries that really matter? Are those people we reach in IIP, or do we see them to be outside? What about critical CSO players? Do we encourage governments that when they are coming, they also come with these critical players, so that through the work we are doing, we continue to build this caucus and this coalition. Let us not become an insider dealing house. Movements do not happen that way. We have to reach out to everybody. Sometimes outside, that is where innovation happens. I hope somebody is keeping time for me. I forgot to time myself. What's my time? I'm good. Okay. So within the people, I think there is some work we can do so that we ensure that we are moving as fast as we ought to be. And I think I'd like to echo the Costa Rica minister that Martin talked about yesterday, where he said that if reform does not get to the classroom, it did not exist. So even if we are training planners are ensuring that they understand the process. If that reform they're leading does not get to the classroom, ladies and gentlemen, then it did not happen. And all the money from Sweden and everywhere has helped us as individuals to grow, which is good, but we are not the primary. We are a conduit to this particular child, isn't it? And so we must always ask ourselves, the training that we have done, did it reach the classroom in this particular place? Because if it did not, then IEP, I think we are not really meeting our ikigai, our mission, because it has not yet reached the classroom. And perhaps to reach the classroom at any given time, and maybe already some ministers are already doing that, it might be perhaps good to always begin with fewer priorities. Select that key priority that will have a catalytic effect. When I think about reading has such a catalytic effect. And that is why I always visualize my world, that if I can ensure everybody can read, then I think then one can then move to the next stage, because this has particularly been done. So let us encourage that we look at a priority and ensure this priority is done. And this priority should be able to catalyze something for others. The one thing it should catalyze is fairness for all our citizens. It cannot be that it allows only some citizens to get to work. The last P is politics. Politics is power. Eric serves. Do you continue to serve in politics in your ministry in the party? We have politicians over here. Politics is power. We have to understand how power moves. And the trainings that IEP gives needs to allow our planners to understand that. Some of them as ministers are politicians, but in some countries, the ministers are not politicians. They are technocrats. That is how come I was once a deputy minister. I am not a politician. But it was very important that, and it was the one area that I remember I would shy away. But you have to understand politics, because politics is power. I do not know if IEP has a module on politics. If not, maybe one has to think about it. Because remember, as I said, education alone cannot do it alone. As I conclude, I'd like to conclude with a proverb from the Sudan that states, the first camel pulls the caravan, but it is the last one that gets bitten. I repeat, the first camel pulls the caravan, but it is the last one that gets bitten. You and I today are pulling a caravan. And we have to ask ourselves, what are we going to bequeath the generations to come? What are we going to bequeath the world? If we go regional, we who identify we come from the global south, what will we bequeath our children? Because it is therein that we have so many children who are not even able to read. Shall we allow them to continually be bitten by the other world that is bequeathing their children a little bit more than us, that has given them foundational literacy, that has given them certain competencies that allow them to rule their world. It is important when we are thinking about the future, we position ourselves as responsible citizens who are doing the rightful for these generations to come. Are we able to re-engineer how this caravan is moving? And I always look that there are so many simple things we could have done, especially for us in the global South, that will ensure we are more embracive, that education as a social justice issue is fair to everybody. And I think, for example, of our annual statistical reports. Why have we not inverted the reporting? Why do we continue to talk about 85% are now in school, 60% are able to read? Why can't we talk about 5% are not able to read? And everybody knows that the 5% is what, as a planner, we have to focus attention to. It's very simple. Why are we not doing that? I think it is because 85% makes we, as the adults, feel good. But when you say 5% are not able to, then it shows that you need to do something. So perhaps these are simple things that we can do so that we focus on the planning and strategies we need to ensure that the system is embracing of all. We need to also continue reporting on outcomes. When I look at the statistical reports, the economic surveys in my country, they are still talking about access. We do not have even any reports on learning outcomes, however we define them. This is how I think we can begin to re-engineer this particular caravan. So I agree, as in the topic that I was given, that the future indeed starts now. We need to pull this caravan at the desired pace, bringing each and everyone, using sound planning, making it inclusive, guided by the spirit of fairness and justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and whether by accident or design, you have very much finished on time. So thank you. Just before we go for our coffee break, it's a good time to remind you to please fill in our guest book so we can hear about how you found these 2 days. If you could scan the QR code on the back of your badge, or if you're joining us online, it's available via the chat. And for those of you here in Paris, it would not, of course, be a birthday celebration without a cake. We invite you to join us at 6 o'clock this evening for a cocktail and to help us cut the cake and blow out the candles. So we hope to see you there. So we'll now take a short coffee break. Please make your way back down the stairs when you hear the tiny bell. And we will see you at 11 o'clock. And please leave any food and hot drinks upstairs. We can't have them in the auditorium. See you at 11 o'clock. Thank you. Hello, everybody. Just before we start in a few moments, it's to mention that a few of the speeches here will be in French. So if you need a headset for translation, please get one from the door. Thank you. Please forgive the short delay. We will begin in around 2 minutes' time. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, and thank you for responding so well to the bell, for those of you here in the room. We are here to look at thematic priority 3, how can planning and management better contribute to the promotion of gender equality in tomorrow's world? We are delighted to welcome as moderator for this panel, Elspeth McComish. Elspeth is a programme specialist in the section of Education for Inclusion and Gender Equality at UNESCO. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's session. Time is running out. We have only 7 years left to achieve the Education 2030 agenda. And at the same time, the Transforming Education Summit that was convened by UN Secretary General Guterres in September last year spurred a global movement to radically rehaul our education systems. Now, transforming education, as you know, means rethinking every step of the education process, from the sector analyses we carry out to the design of curricular and learning materials through to teacher training and evaluation. It also means moving beyond an approach focused on getting learners into classrooms to one focused on ensuring that they learn and that what they learn helps them to build the societies that we want. This session today will dive into IIEP's thematic priority on gender and equity in education. Our aim is to reflect the recent directions set by the Institute to address the challenges that member states tell us that they are seeing on the ground, which are reflected in IIEP's overall research, training, and technical cooperation offered through its 3 offices in Argentina, Senegal, and of course, here in France. Now, IIEP, as you well know, is an essential and much loved part of the UNESCO family. Its focus on the promotion of gender equality is firmly in line with UNESCO's priority gender equality and its strategy for gender equality in and through education for 2019 through to 2025, which sets out 3 objectives: better data, better legal, policy, and planning frameworks, and better teaching and learning practices to empower. Now, through its recognized expertise and learning, IIEP is contributing actively to the achievement of these objectives. We hope that this session today will be an opportunity to explore the future of educational planning and management from different perspectives. Je vais passer en français.
Moving on to French, Patricia Devine from IIEP will give us an idea, the journey towards gender transformative education. It will show how IIEP designs a number of technologies and tools in order to plan education. We will also hear 2 important decision makers who are carrying out the good work in their countries. First, Her Excellency Ms. Maria Toukoune, Minister of National Education and Literacy in Côte d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, who will soon be with us. She's currently in Fontenoy for the General Conference, but she'll be with us very soon. Mrs. Adama Momo, Director of Policy and Planning within the Ministry of Basic and Senior Secondary Education, Sierra Leone. And then they will explain how planning and management of the education systems can promote gender equality and how IIEP work contributes to that change. And then we'll listen to Pauline Rose from Cambridge, who will tell us about the changes and the reforms underway in terms of gender equity in education. Fabricia, you have the floor.
Merci Elspeth. Bonjour à toutes et à tous.
Thank you, everyone. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to tell you to draw a balance sheet of what IIEP does in terms of gender equity. There are three parts of my presentation. Where is our starting point? Where do we stand? And where are we going? So this path first, IEP has come a long way since its establishment in 1963. We have an historical viewpoint, but we've come a long way since we were created in 1963, not least in the area of gender equality. I don't have time to show you all of these components, but I'll try to pick out a few highlights today and how the IEP has found its place in gender equality, girls' equality, in connection with education. And so back in 1963, at that time, the world was only beginning to be aware of the reality of equality, gender inequalities in society. Fernando Reimers showed this yesterday. Back in the 60s, there was a lot of social movements, including the movements for women's rights. So it was a decade of feminist struggles. 10 years on, IEP was part of a momentum. It caught the momentum behind UNESCO's adoption of CEDAW, the Decade of Women's Rights, and a number of founding conferences were set up, Mexico City, Nairobi, Copenhagen, among others. And then in 1979, a great commitment, the CEDAW, CEDAW 1979, which was the first convention to include women's rights in the UN. And so it caught that momentum behind UNESCO's adoption of CEDAW. And then it a number of reports mentioning the disparities that were clearly in evidence, and also calling for more and better disaggregated data where there was none, in order to fully understand the disparities in the educational outcomes between boys and girls. Beijing Declaration took place in '74, and it included 6 education-related strategic objectives. And even today, it is the most ambitious document on this. So as I said, there were 6 education-related strategic objectives, and this added considerable weight to the growing attention being paid to the inequalities in education. And soon afterwards, IEP adopted a gender mainstreaming approach to its work supporting governments with technical support and capacity development. Its publications and partnerships too reflected a bolder stance on the issue, including new understandings about the intersectional causes of gender inequalities at a time when the situation was still fluid. In 2003, as the enormity of the tasks inherent in achieving the Millennium Development Goals was sinking in, IEP hosted the International Working Group on Education, and with this, a clear consensus emerged. Merely aiming for gender parity was not enough. A purely quantitative approach was not enough. In other words, gender-sensitive approaches were needed to clearly feature in education sector planning if inequalities were to be addressed. In 2014, for the first time, IEP included gender equality as a high priority strategic document, and it was part of the SDGs that were set up in 2015. And all know the SDG 4. In 2017, the GRESP, the Gender Responsive Education Sector Planning Approach, was formalized by the Global Partnership for Education and UNGEI, with the support of IEP, UNICEF, and other actors. In 2019, the subject of gender responsive sectoral planning has been put at the top of the political agenda. And I am a co-pilot of that initiative. It was this gender at the center initiative has been launched by the G7 Ministers of Education and Development. And the approach is the one to embed gender equality in the DNA of African education systems. Of course, we are all very much on a journey within IEP. We're still undergoing change. We are questioning our practices. We want to adjust to the challenges of today as in the challenges of tomorrow, alongside our counterparts in the countries with whom we work. This is a journey which requires us to look internally as well as externally, as we will see. Now, what is that so-called GRESP approach? It is a holistic approach. It takes up systems. So, as you can see here, there are many components which go into the mix when we work with the national government to support a shift towards the goal of evidence-based gender transformative planning. So we have diagnosis, we have a sectoral dialogue, a technological discussions, generation of evidence in order to better inform policies. So there's a whole range of assets conducted with governments and civil society. Let me give you a few examples of tools developed by IEP, key tools and methodologies developed over the last few years by IEP to adjust our analyses and to adjust our components to go beyond parity, beyond quantitative aspects, to go into qualitative aspects. And then we cross various demographic components to secure an intersectional analysis. We also take on board school gender issues that were not so present in our analysis. We try and undertake a transformational approach. As I said, just as there are many ingredients which go into our approach, there are also multiple entry points in the continuous cycle of analysis, policy making, planning, and management. So when we work on gender, we look at those approaches, we try and have a definition of planning along these lines, planning including the management of education systems. And so we're looking at the whole set of planning and management practices. And we take different starting points depending on what point the country is at in terms of its planning and delivery cycle. So we have a set of core tools and methodologies we employ and adjust depending on the situation, from analyzing the education sector with the gender lens to integrating gender equality in education sector plans in education financial simulation models and budgets through institutional gender diagnostics to inform organizational change policies. We also locate research at the core of those policies. For instance, the women's female-led schools, female school leadership, we carried out an analysis to reveal better learning outcomes for students. So this brings us to a reflection on the feminization of school principals in the countries with which we are discussing. So this is about applied research and about informing policies. Now, let me move on. I have about 5 minutes left. Let me look at this when we look at the journey on equity and taking on board gender equality in our institutions. This journey, integration of gender and sector planification, carried through a lot of issues. And I believe that there are two main challenges. Resistance challenges and crisis challenges. Now, resistance is found at different levels and is manifested both internally within institutions, schools, local education authorities, central government departments, and even in working groups, and then externally in our societies and amongst our politicians. Strategies to combat resistance to the promotion of gender equality must start with an informed understanding of the reasons behind it, which are often complex. Through the endeavors of the Gender at the Center initiative, we've learned about the value of investing time and resources in capacity development activities, which help to elicit this understanding in workshops and activities. We talk about strategies to go around those resistances and alliances that take place internally or externally to set very high this issue. Now, challenges also go beyond our control. Conflict situations, natural disasters, and health crises, which have short and long-term knock-on effects on education. And you know that crisis situations exacerbate gender inequalities. And I'd like to quote the famous French philosopher and feminist Simone de Beauvoir, who rightly said, "Never forget that a political, economic, or religious crisis is all it takes for women's rights to be called into question. These can never be taken for granted. You must remain vigilant throughout your lives." Awareness of the hugely gendered intersectional impacts of crisis events has increased hugely over recent years to enable a focus on crisis preparedness, which includes gender equality as a priority. That's what we try to do in IPE, to set up bridges between education planning, crisis-sensitive this and crisis. And in these contexts, clearly, we have to take gender-sensitive education planning. But what the 60th anniversary coincides with the final month of the pilot phase of the Gender at the Center initiative with our partner institution, UNGEI. We will keep flying the flag for gender equality and in through education and calling for accountability at all levels for its continued prioritization. We want that to take a global dimension, and we try to do this with our partners. We try to exchange knowledge. We work with governments. We are a support group. We don't propose solutions, but we try and develop capabilities, and we bring our knowledge. And then we have a third role where we are going to increase our capability as national governments and other stakeholders look at evidence-based approaches. We are trying to bring innovating approaches. And finally, we mentioned a number of challenges yesterday. climate change, crises, new technologies. All of this depends on an incorporation of gender equality. Thank you for your attention.
Merci Fabricia pour cet aperçu de la manière.
Thank you, Fabricia, for telling us how IPE develops targeted and holistic approaches to help governments identify and overcome resistances that are increasingly complex. Mrs. Minister of Ivory Coast is with us. I would like to turn to her. Her Excellency, Mrs. Minister, do you want to come up to the podium, please? I know you just arrived, so maybe you're not ready, but I'd like to say that the Ivory Coast has managed to increase the schooling of pupils in primary and secondary school. They are currently increasing efforts to improve learning and to retain girls in the secondary education. Can you tell us about your experience? Please come up to the podium.
Merci à tous. Bonjour.
Thank you. Good morning. Sorry for being late. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say that I'm very glad for Ivory Coast to be here for this session. I'd like to thank the organizers for bringing in the Ivory Coast to this important reflection. And I'm very honored to be invited here. I would like to greet the remarkable work achieved by IEP. For more than 60 years, it managed to set up robust capabilities in terms of analysis, planning, and management in our countries to support our educational system, including my country. The Ivory Coast went from an approach of schooling girls to a holistic gender equality approach. And this translated into an incorporation of gender in education planning. Since 2018, we have set up a DEEG, a Division for Equality and Gender Equality, as well as broad framework documents to institutionalize gender within our ministry. There are several documents, including the ministry's document, on gender policy, the strategic plan for the education of girls, the 5-year plans to implement gender equality policies. So we have a framework. And our operations have shown some very interesting results on access, on learning findings, and on the removing of gender disparities. Now, there has been a notable improvement in primary and secondary schooling, but we still are facing a major crisis of learning. We have a gender parity index, which is 0.73 for the first stage of secondary education, and only 14% of our MPs are women. So that's just not enough. So the Ivory Coast wants to do more to achieve gender equality in its educational system and in its society. There is a momentum on the way. Players have been mobilized, and it is in this spirit that our government recently developed a partnership compact for priorities, for operationalizing identified reforms during the National Forum on National Education and Literacy. So there are 4 major dimensions: improving fundamental learning. Number 2, the relevance of programs and the quality of teaching. 3rd, the reform of teachers. 4th, the broadening and the revising of the educational offer, in non-formal educational offer. We have the support of UNESCO through the IEP, and we drafted a partnership compact which shows our ambition to translate those priorities and strategies in terms of gender equality into concrete interventions in order to develop our educational system. We want to improve basic learning in order to have a sustainable transformation of our basic education. Now, this compact sets up a number of operations to change the learning conditions for boys and girls, change gender standards and power dynamics in education, and to have more equity in the Ivory Coast society, more gender equality. We propose various general operations, not necessarily focused on one sex, but it might be more advantageous for girls or for boys. So those would be gender specific operations to remove obstacles. Furthermore, we propose a number of specific steps to strengthen gender equality in and through education. So there's a number of steps that have been taking on board various forms of violence, gender-based violence in and out of schools, and also taking up social standards that are different. Also, we want to prevent early pregnancies and weddings, the promotion of gender equality among teachers, managers, and school leadership. So in the coming years, we want to translate our gender equality approach into the proposals that I mentioned earlier. We want those efforts to be beneficial both for men and women, girls and boys. We want an equity-based educational system without any stereotypes or discriminations. An educational system that will give all and the same opportunities and the same rights to girls and boys. So the main recommendations that I made are based on strategic actions in various areas. Implementation of those steps, both within the state, with other stakeholders and development partnerships. We have an ambitious policy. We want it to be clear. We want gender equality and empowerment of women. Number 3, we want adequate financing for all this. 4, we want systems and processes to implement gender equality and empowerment of women. And finally, we want implementation capabilities, human resources, to achieve gender equality as well as knowledge management. Thank you for your attention. Sorry again for being late.
Alors,
Merci. Merci, Madame la Ministre.
Thank you, Minister. This holistic and ambitious approach of gender equality that you presented is very much in line with the Summit on Education Transformation. And I hope that you will be able to share your experience with other countries, especially through the World Global Platform for Education that was launched during the summit and that is co-chaired by UNESCO.
Let me now invite Ms. Adama Momo of Sierra Leone to the podium. Ms. Momo, your government played a leading role in the Transforming Education Summit, including as co-chair. Your country's 2021 national policy on radical inclusion in education is also a key driver for the inclusion of gender equality in planning. Can you tell us about the lessons that you've learned, please?
Thank you very much, His Excellencies, Mr. Director, IIEP, and Madam Director, UNESCO, colleagues, member countries, Good morning, all. As you've heard from her introduction, Sierra Leone actually is a new baby emerging from 11 years civil conflict that was officially announced, ended in 2002. And just 10 or 11 years after that, it was again struck by another crisis, the Ebola crisis, that led to the closure of schools, and where over 18,000 girls got pregnant. As if that is not enough, we have 2019, the COVID, that also made girls to stay at home, and learning was not taking place. But notwithstanding that, with strong political commitment and leadership, the highest level, Sierra Leone has tried to institutionalize or mainstream some of the policies so that we ensure that equity and better learning is taking place. As a country, statistically, we cannot be very proud of our gender inequality index, as based on the gender inequality index, we are ranked 25 out of 36 in sub-Saharan African country. Globally, you can see our standard there. According to report by World Bank and other research agencies, we know we have the highest population of youthful, and of course, the bulk of that constitute girls. Notwithstanding the political commitment, there are huge challenges in actually getting the people to effectively implement and mainstream gender activities into our system, despite the fact that we have all the legal instruments, the policies, the strategies in place, but there is still technical challenge in terms of actually how you position people to actually mainstream gender in activities, and also the financial resources. Yes, we have developed a lot of policies, but how do we effectively implement these policies? Some of the key challenges Sierra Leone we face, and as planners will continue to face. But notwithstanding that, Sierra Leone, we have managed to actually develop policies around the radical inclusion, as you had. Radical inclusion policy, we name it radical because it's an intentional and deliberate effort by government to make sure that we don't allow actions or inactions of people to exclude people from having access to education and access to better quality education. So that's why we name it a radical inclusion policy. And that policy actually was established and has been ratified by the government of Sierra Leone and is being implemented across the nation. Notwithstanding that, the lessons we have learned actually that effective partnership and collaboration, it takes time to bring about change. And of course, change cannot happen overnight. Even with the development and introduction of policies, it takes time to actually see the outcome. Evidence-based decision-making. We collect our annual school census data, and it's disaggregated, and analysis helps to inform decision-making and development of policies based on priorities. As you have heard, we are celebrating IIEP 60th anniversary, and I will not go down in celebrating that anniversary without thanking the IIEP, both in Paris and in Dakar, for their technical support they have given to Sierra Leone to develop and mainstream some of the activities I am now discussing here. The IIEP have supported the development of the Education Sector Plan 2022-2026, Transforming Education. You can see the bands on my head. Of course, these are the bands of Sierra Leone, green, white, and blue. We have it. That's kind of a visibility. My sister from Guyana was talking about developing policies and putting them in the shelves. So we want our policies to be out there. So we printed these handbands, we give our school children for them to know that there's a sector strategy that actually caters for them. Also, as I said, the political commitment is there. We heard from her. Our president has been named champion of girls' education at AU level, at a transforming education level, in both Paris, the pre-summit here, and of course, the national summit at New York. So there is that strong political leadership to make sure that gender equality is achieved in the country. Mainstreaming gender into teacher training programs, of course, is one of our techniques we have been using, to ensure that these things are happening. Of course, there is greater encouragement of female ownership of interventions. That's why the GIWE policy, that is the Gender Empowerment and Women's Employment Act. It's a bill that was passed by government in 2022, actually gives 30% participation of women at all levels, in positions of trust, either at public or private sector level. So these are some of the lessons we have learned as a country, in actually ensuring that we mainstream gender equality in and through education. Techniques we have used. As I said, Sierra Leone has developed national referral protocols. And this is to establish the need for service providers to be trained on professional standards in caring for school-based gender violence, particularly child survivors within and outside the school setting. So the aim is to ensure that we receive prompt actions of all survivors from the field and from where the violence is perpetrated. What is it? Challenges? No. Lessons learned. We're done with lessons learned. The female ownership, we've done with it. So let's go to the next page. I was talking about the techniques we have used. One of it has to do with the national referral protocol, and of course the comprehensive school safety policy. And this policy actually is built upon 3 thematic areas. We have safe school facilities and learning environments. We are also focusing on disaster risk reduction in school and the protection from violence and other forms of abuse in and around schools. These are some of the techniques we have been using to ensure that we have gender equality in our schools. Of course, for the school safety policy, this policy is built on 3 policy statements. The policy statement I have explained, the safe school learning facilities, disaster risk reduction, and of course, the protection from violence and forms of abuse in and around schools. And we have 15 thematic areas in each of these areas to address that will be actually monitored and evaluated at the end of implementation or during implementation to ensure that we are actually going by the guides of what we have suggested in the school safety policy. The Education Sector Plan 2022-24, we have objectives, 9 strategic objectives. And one key one is actually how we reduce gender disparity in access and access to school or access or educational outcomes. So the reduction and other disparities in educational access, experience, and outcomes for marginalized children is one of our strategic objectives. Also, the providing of safe, protective, and conducive learning environments for all. Strengthening of the instructional core. So we have reviewed our basic education curriculum, our senior education curriculum, and we have ensured that we have mainstream gender in this curriculum. Also, school governance, school safety committees we have set up to actually monitor the implementation of a safe and protective, conducive learning environment. As a government, what do we, or as a planner, I'm not talking as a government. As a planner, we had from my sister this morning, she was talking about the 3 Ps. You have the people, you have the pillar, okay? And you have the policies. We have the policies. We have the pillars, but the people is challenged. So what we need is inclusive leadership. Inclusive in the sense we bring in the civil societies, we bring in non-governmental organizations, we bring in donor partners to sustain whatever gains we have made in terms of resource and also technical expertise. So I think going forward as a planner for Sierra Leone or for Africa, for our children, we need this collaboration, effective collaboration, and inclusive partnership to plan better for our children. I thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Momo, for these very clear and targeted suggestions, and also obviously for driving the international agenda on gender equality in and through education. And thank you to all of our panelists. Let me now invite Pauline Rose, who is an IIEP-UNESCO Governing Board Member, Professor in International Education, and Director at the Research for Equitable and Access and Learning, or REAL Centre at the University of Cambridge, to respond to the presentations that we've heard.
Thank you, Honourable Minister and colleagues and participants. It's wonderful to be here to be celebrating with you all this 60th anniversary. And as we have heard, there's so much to celebrate and yet so much more to do. I just wanted to start by saying I do love the phrase radical inclusion, and I think we should all go away from this room thinking, what can we contribute to the achievement of radical inclusion? I think that's just not just a rally cry for Sierra Leone, but for everybody who is really committed to the issues that are discussed here. I would also like to really thank our panelists for being so open and honest with both what has been achieved, but also with the challenges that we still face, because we don't always hear those challenges. You know, particularly when we're listening to politicians, sometimes it can be about what we have achieved. Going back to Sara, what you were saying earlier, we're focusing on the 85% rather than those that aren't actually making it. So I think that was really refreshing and important if we are going to achieve that radical inclusion. I just want to start by reflecting on something that I did in about 2000. I was part of what was called a donor mission in Ethiopia for the development of the education sector development plan. And I was there to try and make sure that gender was mainstreamed. I felt a bit of a fraud, to be honest, because the minister at the time was Minister Genet Zewde, who some of you will know, a very powerful minister who was part of the founding of the Forum for African Women Educationalists. She didn't need to be told by me or anybody else what was needed for Ethiopia to mainstream gender. They already had a Women's Affairs Department. They already had various strategies and so on. But then I realized the donors did need convincing. And I was quite shocked. I mean, it was things like teacher professional development. That doesn't have anything to do with gender. We don't need to include anything on gender. I'm hoping now we are in a different situation amongst the donors, as well as everybody else, of not needing to convince ourselves that this is important, but more about how we do it. I'm going to also have some P's. So I don't know, some of them might be the same as yours, Sarah, but some of them might be different. But I think I was asked to sort of summarize what some of the things that have come from these rich discussions, which is really difficult to do. But I think what came out to me was, first of all, that we have actually moved beyond parity. So there's still more to do, as we've been hearing from the various presentations, to achieve gender parity, to achieve equal numbers. But we know that is just the very bottom of the sort of basis of what we need to do. And too often still, we are looking at how we're achieving parity. And I'm afraid to say that even with the monitoring of the Sustainable Development Goals, too much focus has been given to have we achieved parity, not have we moved beyond that. Some of you might recall, again, another anniversary, 20 years ago, there was a global monitoring report on gender. So that was the 2003 Gender Global Monitoring Report. Much of what is in there is still relevant today. It was a focus on equality in and through education, and it was definitely a rally call for moving beyond parity. The second issue is about prioritization, and I think this was something we also heard a lot about earlier, and prioritizing the most marginalized. We know that now, many girls and boys are getting opportunities, but it is really the most marginalized girls who are still being left out. Those girls might be those that are living in remote areas, the poorest, those with disabilities, those living affected in areas affected by conflict and crisis and so on. And in different contexts, it might be different, but really needing to continue to prioritize, but also to prioritize the key issues that we've been hearing around gender-based violence, around discrimination, around what happens next for the girls after if they have had the opportunity to go to school, what happens next? Do they have those equal opportunities? Do they have fair opportunities to move beyond their education? And that requires really addressing social norms that are holding back the opportunities for girls in the same way as boys, allowing them to have the choice and agency to make decisions for themselves. And I think we just need to be thinking far more about how we can achieve that and what is needed in planning for that. So we've got parity, prioritization. My third one is political leadership. And again, something that came up, and we've got the political leadership here on our panel that has really sort of been talking about these issues really strongly. But outside of this room, we don't necessarily hear this as strongly. And we heard about the sort of percentages of women in political leadership positions. Again, this is sort of common across the world and something we need to do far more about. And that links with my fourth point, is listening to the power, so my P of power, of women's voices. I think this world would be in a very different place today if we were listening to such wonderful women as we've got on this all-female panel here, to sort of really think about carefully about what it takes to achieve progress. And fifthly is around partnership. Again, something we heard a lot across the panelists. Partnerships within government, across governments, with donors and donors playing their appropriate roles, with civil society organizations, with teacher unions, and also for IIEP, the importance of partnership with organizations like the Global Partnership for Education and UNGAI, for example. So there's many layers to partnership and many ways in which one needs to partner to really achieve what we're seeking to achieve. I'm going to make a final point, because whenever one has a panel on gender, I can guarantee there will be a question. Anyone want to ask me the question? What about the boys? So I would say, in answer to that, my succinct answer to that is, if you get planning right for the most marginalized girls, you will get it right for all. And that includes the marginalized boys, it includes everybody. But I don't want to finish on the point of what about the boys, but I think what we're here to do is to identify how we can ensure planning is empowering girls and women for their futures. So I'm going to stop there, and I think we have a little bit of time for questions. We've got about 15 minutes for questions. So I'm going to move over to where I've got the potential questions online, but also invite those of you in the room to ask questions. Thank you very much. Quick transition. Do put up your hand if you, oh, sorry, question in the room. I'll see if I can get there. Don't think we've got any online as yet. There's one. Yeah, maybe if you read it. But maybe if you just read the question. Yeah.
Well, just read out online. The transformation of education has the following pillars: gender equality, a participatory approach to the development and implementation of innovations, inclusiveness, and the implementation of supernatural issues. Which others can you cite? And what is your reading of this vision for education policies in sub-Saharan Africa? And this is addressed to Miss Her Excellency Kone. Pardon. Vous avez... Is the microphone working? Je vais pas pouvoir le traduire en live, donc je vais le redire en anglais, mais je pense que vous avez la traduction maintenant. Okay. Okay. Alors, pardon, on l'a maintenant en français. La transformation de l'éducation a pour pilier.
Education transformation has several pillars: gender equality, participation in the development and implementation of innovations, effectivity, and the national and non-national dimensions. Do you have any other ideas of what it could entail?
A big question.
Okay. Vraiment une question vraiment très ambitieuse. Pour amener à la Côte d'Ivoire, moi je voudrais plutôt.
Talking about Côte d'Ivoire, I would like to talk about a cooperation that we have with IIEP. The Institute has been helping us with planning. And for us, It is exemplary cooperation, because thanks to you, we have analyses, planning that help us bridge the gap and have useful data. This is an expertise that has been very beneficial to education planning, analysis in our country. I believe that thanks to a number of studies that have been led and published by the IIEP, we have been able to better understand the issue at stake. And they have been able to help us identify and claim ownership of a number of good practice, of best practice, sorry. I'm not quite sure I completely understand the question, but.
I don't know if there are other questions. Maybe there could be one around your work in terms of social mobilization and civil society organizations and young women. So you are carrying out a number of research work related to that, but you are also mobilizing around you different networks, including from civil society. And so maybe it would be helpful to hear how this takes place, maybe Fabricia, as your role, maybe how it takes place also for you in Sierra Leone, and also the Minister of Côte d'Ivoire also can explain to us a little bit how much civil society, especially, is involved as part of all of this mobilization work. But I see more questions coming. I'm sure, Madame Toto, you have a question.
Should I go now? Thank you very much. This was a fascinating panel, and I think very motivational and actionable as well. As we move on to the next biennium, we're planning a course on gender inclusive, gender sensitive educational planning. So from your perspective, in our training for future generations, what should we prioritize if we have a course that is, you know, short and to the point? Where should we put our efforts in our training so that we, you know, develop and train the next generation of planners with a gender sensitive basis? Thank you.
Merci, je voudrais vous remercier.
I would like to thank you very much for your interventions. I would like to know what you do in the field as to girls who are underprivileged. What can you do to help them, support them, and help them acquire skills and competencies that might be translated into a good way of dealing with future hurdles in the workforce?
One of the partnerships that has been talked about is UNGAI, and UNGAI has been very active in gender transformative education. I am not sure I heard too much about that, so if we could hear a comment on what IEP thinks about this, and indeed your countries, not gender responsive, but gender transformative education.
Thank you very much. I wanted to ask a question and relate back to what several of you mentioned about challenges that are outside of the education sector. So we see more girls going to school, we see more girls getting an education, but then you talk about the cultural barriers, the societal barriers, the barriers in the workforce about not getting a job. So how do you see the link between education and the education sector and other sectors? And is there a movement in the society at large, in the countries that you represent, and also, Pauline, from a research perspective, what do you see in developing countries and in those countries where we have those pockets of the most marginalized girls that are still not in school and still not learning as much as we would like to see while they're in school? That bigger question would be great if you could touch more on that. Thanks.
And maybe a last one from this round, from Bonaventure.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much to the panelists. looking at the best timing to intervene and to make sure that gender is best taken into account into strategies and best mainstreams into strategies. Well, I think that we need to better work with countries so that strategy development is developed under the light of gender. In other words, what happens is that there are diagnoses, strategies, and we in African countries, we find it very difficult to make sure that the sector plan is developed at the same time as gender-specific strategies and not alongside them to a point that they will never meet and never reconcile.
Thank you so much. I think some excellent questions there. And I don't think we're expecting you all to answer everything, but maybe choose the ones that you think you're best placed to. I think there's one or two that are quite obvious. Honourable Minister, maybe I'll start with you. There were ones in particular around the issues around the planning, the last point there about when best to include gender within the planning, and perhaps also the point around how you interlink with things going on outside of the education sector. To what extent are you able to collaborate with other ministries and so on, to recognising that a lot of the challenges actually happen outside? But feel free to answer any of the questions as you prefer.
Merci. Thank you. I noted a question regarding the role of NGOs, civil societies, organizations, in what we do. Within the Ivory Coast, we set up what is called the Local Group for Educational Partners. And within that group, civil society is called upon to participate. It takes part in decision-making, it takes part in services, delivery, and all assessment steps. Civil society has to be on the ground in order to raise the awareness of people to gender issues, gender-based violence. That's what I mentioned earlier on. So we're talking about raising awareness. Some NGOs or civil societies organizations are spread out over the national territory depending on cultural specifics. Some of them may work in one language and not another language. I'll spare you the details. There was another question, I think. Someone asked, what do you do on the ground for those girls facing up a lot of difficulties, including the difficulty of finding a job or job-related difficulties? Now, let me tell you what we do. For those girls who didn't have much schooling, didn't go to school, what we do in terms of literacy, informal schooling, informal education. So we are the National Education Ministry, and as such, we take this up. But this is also a cross-cutting issue. It cuts across several ministries, so we do the coordination. There's the Agriculture Ministry, there is the National Security Ministry, the Defense Ministry, ministry responsible for families and women and children. So there are various issues that relate to various activities. There's the informal economy issues and so on and so forth. So that's what we do. Now, all of those actions, or at least some of those actions, contribute to help those women find businesses find activities to be empowered and to be economically independent.
Thank you so much for that comprehensive response. And I think you actually addressed a lot of those questions in a really coherent way and really important issues raised. Maybe if we now turn to Sierra Leone and any further points that you would like to make, answer any of the questions as you prefer, and then you'll get the ones that are left behind. And any others you want.
Okay. First of all, I'm not working for ONGAI, so I will leave that to the IIEP person. But I would just want to share ideas and what we have done through the GCI project, in Sierra Leone, through IIEP. Technically, they have supported Sierra Leone and both the sector diagnosis leading to the education sector plan development. And that diagnosis actually gives us the light as to what is happening with regards to gender issues in Sierra Leone. The report was not very comfortable for any gender expert. So we use that diagnosis report to actually design our program and prioritize our activities in our new sector plan. So that is one of the good work we are doing with IIEP under the ONGAI project. And of course, series of trainings have been undertaken. I had a question as to going forward, what do we need to focus on in gender sensitive training? I think just like I always refer to that my sister this morning, just as she said, we have to move out of our comfort zone in the sense that we know ourselves, we know our education, we are educational planners, we are educationists, we are educators, we are in the same lagoon. So we need to, move to the ocean, and the ocean there, I'm talking about ministries like education, ministries like finance, because whatever we are doing, one of the burden we have is the financial constraint we have as a country. Yes, donors are supporting some of this initiative, but when it comes to actually national budget, national allocation to some of these interventions, it's very minimal. So we need also to get those that are involved in those allocations of those resources, to know our plight as educationists, because whatever we can proffer to them in terms of actually our needs, they also have their needs, especially when they are planning for everybody. So we need to get out to them, we reach out to them, or reach out to other institutions that we are working with, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Gender, so that, we are talking with one voice. So I think gender at the center of initiative, the GCI project is doing that for us in Sierra Leone. We're having a series of trainings in terms of gender responsive budgeting, gender responsive in TVET, and the sector diagnosis, the financial simulation modeling of the whole sector plan itself to actually know what will be our overall purpose in administering some of these interventions. So we need that kind of collaboration. That's why I said inclusiveness is the key challenge here. Talking about challenges outside education, cultural barriers. What we have done as a country is actually, as I said, inclusive education. You have to involve the local communities. So we have stakeholders engagement. You have your civil societies that are working with ministries of education, because at the end of the day, you have developed your plan, you are seated in your office. They are the people that are monitoring these interventions. They are the ones that do the advocacy. So we need to actually involve other people. Like in Sierra Leone, we have evolved even the traditional leaders. These are the people that are custodians of their people at the local council. They implement, they develop bylaws. Government has its general law that is made at community level, they have bylaws, and bylaws, like for instance, during the COVID, the Ebola, when they said nobody should touch, so they were ensuring that, even though pregnancy was high, but that was actually maintained to maintain distance, So you need participation, local participation. You need the community people. You need the SMCs, the school management committees. You need other entities formed at district level to actually implement all of these activities. So I don't think education alone will do that. And especially so we are focusing on marginalized. You need a community engagement in this to drive this whole thing forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Some more really important points. I'm afraid, Fabrizio, you've only got 1 minute to respond. And I know you've got lots to say, but you are between everybody and their lunch now. And I'm sure sort of a key answer, particularly to the point on the gender transformative education point, will be really appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Yes, we work together with UNGAI and other partners because this is an alliance. So we work in partnership with other partners, and in a transformative way. Really, we focus on system-wide transformation, and that means that we work at different levels, at all the levels of the system, from policies to community engagement through pedagogies and other stuff. And we really work from analysis to implementation to working with community, and this is really the gender transformative approach. This is something that infused the Gender at the Center initiative, and that we work together with UNGAI really to have this agenda, you know, at the highest level, and really continuing to foster critical examination of inequality, of gender norms, or of gender dynamics and power, because we talked about power, and also just 20 seconds about the best moment to intervene, to take into account gender equality, because this is something that was really important in our work. And this also has to do with the dialogue internal to the Ministries of Education between the Department of Planning and the Department of Budget, and also the Department of Focal Points on Gender Equality, so that all those people also dialogue and strengthen also this collaboration internally, because we saw several examples of, you know, focal points gender that were not included in the conversation when taking, you know, strategic decision in the budget, strategic decision on the strategies, etc. So it will really foster, you know, the collaboration internally, and I think that this is really key to have this dialogue internally. Thank you.
Thank you. And I won't take time now to answer the question on research, because I would go on for too long. But I just to say, I was very pleasantly surprised to hear everybody talking about the importance of evidence. And I think that evidence-informed planning, the role of evidence in really making sure we are keeping track and doing what we have set out to do is vital. But happy to have a longer conversation about that. Back to you.
Do I turn this on? Okay, perfect. Thank you. Well, as we were just saying, this has been an amazing conversation. I know I don't have very long, so I am going to be as quick as possible. Also, Pauline did a fantastic summary earlier of the main points raised. For me, I think there are three things that have come out very clearly. One is around the need for a holistic approach to addressing gender-based barriers to education, while still targeting marginalized girls who are in particularly vulnerable situations, such as we see was done in Sierra Leone with the re-entry policy for girls to be able to go back to school after they've fell pregnant. Secondly, the importance of dialogue between education and other ministries, with political leaders, with civil society, youth leaders, traditional leaders, and also in some cases with donors. And then thirdly, the importance of evidence and also evidence sharing, and again, the role of IIEP in that. Just very quickly in this regard, I mentioned earlier the global platform for gender equality in and through education. Just to clarify for those who aren't aware, this was launched during the Transforming Education Summit. It brings together around 80 government, civil society organizations. So it's really in the spirit of what we were talking about just now. Just yesterday, the global platform launched the Global Accountability Dashboard, which tracks progress against indicators set out in the call to action on advancing gender equality in and through education that was adopted during the test. I would really encourage you to go look at it. It builds on the evidence for gender and education resource, which is done by the Population Council. It adds the new indicators from the call to action. It's also extended the data analysis from low and middle income countries to all countries in the spirit of the test. And most importantly and excitingly for those of you here, we really want to ensure that this is an opportunity to share transformative practices. So I think some of you were mentioning the need for countries to be able to share experiences and so on. Please, for those of you who have transformative practices to share, get in contact with us, have a look at the dashboard and see how you can share your practices so that others can learn from them. Thank you again. I will stop now. I think it's been a really interesting session. A big applause to our panelists, please.
Thank you to the panel for a very thought-provoking session. I'd like to quickly mention our shuttle service, which is running between here at IIEP and UNESCO headquarters for the General Conference. The first shuttle is leaving in a few minutes' time. So if you're interested, please make your way to the reception when we leave the room. But there is a second shuttle if you wish to stay for lunch, and that one leaves at 1:30. There is a limited capacity for this. We will now, of course, take a lunch break, restarting at 1:15. Please note there are 3 different serving areas upstairs, so it may be quicker to not go to the first one. And when you're leaving the room, it's a great idea to leave your headsets behind so we don't lose any of them. Thank you very much. Please listen for the bell at 1:15 and we will see you then. Enjoy your lunch.